Lee Marvin. 10 unbelievable documented moments. 10 unbelievable but documented stories of Lee Marvin. Snorts. He was expelled from 15 schools. Not 5, not 8, 15. He threw a classmate out of a second-story window. His own mother couldn't stand him. By 18, he dropped out for good and enlisted in the Marines just in time for some bloodiest fighting in the Pacific. Fast forward 20 years, he wins the Academy Award for Best Actor, playing a drunk. He dedicates half the Oscar to a horse. A few years later, he can't sing a single note, but records a song that knocks the Beatles off the #1 spot in England. But here's what nobody saw coming. The most dangerous man in Hollywood stumbled into acting because he was fixing a toilet. The combat veteran who survived 21 amphibious assaults would be buried at Arlington National Cemetery right next to boxing legend Joe Louis. And his headstone, music, wouldn't mention a single movie that it would read Lee Marvin, PFC, U.S. Marine Corps, World War II. These are 10 moments from Lee Marvin's life that were documented. Let's begin. Number 1. The one blue blood rebel. Expelled from 15 schools. Blue blood rebel who couldn't be tamed. On February 19, 1924 in New York City, Lamont Waltman Marvin Jr. was born into a family that should have produced Agent Lemon. His father, Lamont S., was an advertising executive who headed the New York and New England Apple Institute. His mother, Courtney Washington David, was a fashion writer and beauty consultant. Through his mother's bloodline, he was a first cousin, 4 times removed of Confederate General Robert E. Lee. That's who he was named after. His brother Robert got the same namesake. On paper, this was old American aristocracy. Clear's throat. The Marvin family traced its roots to Matthew Marvin Sr., who immigrated from Essex, England in 1635 and helped found Hartford, Connecticut. Lee Marvin was also a second cousin, 6 times removed of George Washington himself. Hugh is descended from 2 of the most famous families in American history. None of it mattered. The boy was a walking disaster. Biographer Dwayne Epstein later speculated that Marvin suffered from undiagnosed attention deficit disorder and dyslexia, which would explain why he performed miserably in school and couldn't sit still. He was shipped from boarding school to boarding school across New York. Manu School in Pauling Peekskill Military Academy, getting expelled from each one for fighting, smoking, truancy, and general defiance. He later boasted about being thrown out of 15 schools. At one music school does. He threw a classmate out of a second-floor window. He and his mother never got along. She came from Southern aristocratic stock and expected refinement. What she got was a boy who seemed determined to destroy every opportunity placed in front of him. Hugh was eventually sent to St. Leo College Preparatory School, a Catholic institution in Florida, where the nuns could impose stricter discipline. Boothery's the detail that reveals everything about Lee Marvin. Florida changed something in him. Not the school, but the land around it. Young Lee spent every spare weekend hunting deer, puma, wild turkey, and bob white quail in what he described as the wild south, the then uncharted Everglades. He became an expert marksman long before the Marines ever handed him a rifle. The boy who couldn't sit through a single class could spend days tracking game through swampland without complaint. That skill, patience, silence, and their ability to hold perfectly still and wait for the right shot would save his life in the Pacific and define his career on screen. The kid who flunked out of 15 schools was already training for war. He just didn't know it yet. Number 2. 212 21 amphibious assaults in the Pacific beaches under fire. When Pearl Harbor was attacked in December 1941, Lee Marvin was 17 years old and still failing at St. Leo's. He realized he wouldn't be allowed to enlist without finishing school. So he went back to Klaus, the only time academics ever mattered to him long enough to qualify. On August 12, 1942, at age 18, he enlisted in the United States Marine Corps against his father's wishes. Hugh was assigned to I Company, 3rd Battalion, 24th Marine Regiment, 4th Marine Division. After training, he qualified as a scout sniper, which meant that operated ahead of the main force, gathering intelligence and eliminating enemy targets. He wasn't sitting in area filing reports. He was at the tip of the spear. The 4th Marine Division fought in the Pacific Theater, which meant island hopping campaigns against heavily fortified Japanese positions. There were no clear front lines and no safe areas. Every yard of jungle and beach had to be taken from an enemy that almost never surrendered. Lee Marvin participated in 21 amphibious assaults. That number deserves to sink in. 21 times he climbed into a landing craft, rowed toward a hostile beach, and charged directly into enemy fire Marines, and those landing craft were sitting ducks for artillery and machine guns, and the first waves suffered catastrophic casualties. Marvin was Untold's first waves over and over again. The assaults included Quadrillion Eniwatik and Saipantinian, some of the most brutal engagements of the entire war. Most Marines who survived a single amphibious assault considered themselves lucky. Lee Marvin survived 21, and then his luck ran out. 3 Saipan. The machine gun burst that changed him. Number 3. The machine gun burst that changed everything. On June 18, 1944, during the Battle of Saipan, Lee Marvin's unit was assaulting Japanese positions on Mount Tapok when enemy machine gun fire ran across their line. Marvin was hit. A bullet severed his sciatic nerve, a catastrophic wound. That should have killed him or left him crippled for life. He was also struck in the foot by an enemy sniper. He wasn't the only casualty. Most of his company was cut down during the same assault. The losses on Saipan were devastating. Marvin spent over a year in military hospitals, enduring multiple surgeries and grueling rehabilitation, fighting Tolk again. Doctors told him he would always have a limp. Through sheer determination, he taught himself to disguise the permanent nerve damage well enough that most audiences never noticed it in his films. But music, the damage was real, and he carried pain from that machine gun burst for the rest of his life. Think about that. Every time you saw Lee Marvin walk across a screen looking like the toughest man alive, he was compensating for a wound that never fully healed. For his service, he received the Purple Heart, the Presidential Unit Citation, the Asiatic Pacific Campaign Medal, the American Campaign Medal, the World War II Victory Medal, and the Combat Action Ribbon. He was medically discharged with the rank of Private First Class. Unlike many active veterans who romanticized their service, Marvin was brutally honest about what combat was actually like. He once said, "I was scared to death. Anybody who wasn't scared wasn't they." And he put it even more bluntly in another interview. "I got shot in the ass and sent home. That's the truth." Any man who says he enjoyed combat is either a liar or a fool. Director John Borman, who worked with Marvin on Point Blank, later observed, "Lo understood violence in a way most actors never will. When he portrayed a violent man, there was a truth to it that came from having seen men kill and be killed. The menace audiences saw on screen wasn't acting. For the plumber who accidentally became an actor, music, it was memory." Number 4. The plumber who accidentally became an actor. After the war, Lee Marvin was lost. He had no education to speak of, no career prospects, and a body full of shrapnel and nerve damage. He couldn't shake the anger, the frustration, and worst of all, the survivor's guilt. While other veterans considered careers as forest rangers or car salesmen, Marvin drifted back to Woodstock, New York, where he found work as a plumber's assistant at a local community theater. One day in 1946, while he was literally fixing the plumbing backstage, an actor fell ill during rehearsal for a Red Cross benefit called 10 Nights in a Barroom. Someone needed to fill in. Marvin, as who happened to be the only person available, was pulled from behind the pipes and pushed onto the stage. Something clicked. The combat veteran who couldn't sit through a classroom lecture discovered he could hold an audience. Biographer Dwayne Epstein noted that performing music provided an outlet to express his inner demons that had been frustrating him since the war. Acting didn't cure the nightmares, but it gave the rage somewhere to go. That accidental audition led to a summer stock job with the Maverick Theater in 1947, paying $7 a week. From there, Marvin used his GI Bill to study at the American Theater Wing in New York. He appeared in off-Broadway productions, including the original version of Billy Budd in 1949, and began landing small television roles on shows like Escape, The Big Story, and Treasury Men in Action. His first film role came in 1951, a small part in Yuri in the Navy, now alongside another unknown at the time named Charles Bronson. Marvin decided to stay in Hollywood, where his war experience made him invaluable on set. Directors quickly learned that the tall, silver-haired veteran with a growly voice could make military scenes look authentic because he'd actually lived them. He could correct the way actors held a rifle, demonstrate realistic combat movement, and bring a physical truth to violence that nobody else in the room possessed. The man who started his entire career because a toilet needed fixing would become one of the most respected actors in American cinema. Lee Marvin himself summed it up perfectly. Broadway was a damn bore. The New York stage is a hustle. Hollywood at least felt on his point. 5. John Ford's most terrifying villain. Liberty Valance at number 5. The most terrifying villain John Ford ever filmed. Through the early 1950s, Marvin was TYP cast ass-heavy in film after film. He played psychopaths, thugs, and killers with a naturalism that unnerved audiences and co-stars alike. In The Big Heat in 1953, he played Vince Stone, a gangster who throws scalding coffee in Gloria Graham's face, a scene that shocked audiences and remains one of the most disturbing moments in film noir history. That same year, he played a rival motorcycle gang leader opposite Marlon Brando in The Wild One. But it was John Ford who gave Marvin the role that cemented his reputation in The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance. In 1962, Marvin played the title character opposite John Wayne and Jimmy Stewart. Music, two of biggest stars in Hollywood history. Marvin played Liberty Valance with such cold-blooded authority that he dominated every scene he was in, even standing across from the Duke himself. The film's title tells you everything. The entire story revolves around the man who shot Liberty Valance. That's how dangerous Marvin made the character. He was so threatening that his death became the defining event of the film. Wayne reportedly took a liking to Marvin despite or perhaps because of his intensity and specifically requested him for Donovan's Reef the following year. James Coburn, himself known for playing hard-edged roles, once said, "When Lee walked onto a set, there was an immediate shift in the atmosphere. Everyone straightened up a bit. There was something genuinely dangerous about him that you couldn't quite put your finger on, but you definitely felt it." Here's what made Lee Marvin different from every other screen villain of that era. The other actors were pretending. Marvin was simply being himself in front of a camera, and the camera knew the difference. Number 6. He won the Oscar for a drunk, and half given to a horse playing a drunk and gave half to a horse. In 1965, everything changed. Lee Marvin, the career villain, was offered a dual role in Cat Ballou, a comedic western starring Jane Fonda. Kirk Douglas had been offered the part first, but his agent turned it down thinking it was too small. Douglas later wrote in his 2007 memoir, "My agent talked me out of it because he thought the part was too small." Lee Marvin played the part and won an Oscar. Bad decision by my agent. Marvin played two characters. Kid Shalene, a hopeless, stumbling drunk who can barely stay upright on his horse. And Tim Strawn, Shalene's brother, a cold-blooded killer with a prosthetic silver nose. It was the first time audiences had seen Marvin be genuinely funny. The physical comedy was extraordinary. His pants falling around his ankles, leaning against a shed in a drunken